straight into wise words here with the wonderful, the delectable, the highly, the words just can't describe Jay Darkmoore. How are you doing, mate? Are you all right?
Also known as the bellend with the shaved head, who doesn't shut up online.
There we go. That's the boy.
So straight away, if we've not been demonetized straight away, or this hasn't been struck off by me uttering the first swearing of the day, then
that's all right.
I'm all right, mate.
Don't worry.
I'm all right, mate. I'm a little bit warm. Let me open my window. But yeah, I'm sound. I'm really good. Thank you very much for having me on. As we were talking just in the green room before we start recording, I've you reached out to me, which is absolutely brilliant. But I've also really enjoyed watching some of your stuff too. I think as we were talking beforehand, we were talking about how YouTube seems to be changing a little bit in the sense of we are moving away from this hyper overstimulating content and more just to real people having real discussions and talking about real issues. And I think that's why your channel and certainly your videos are doing so well at the moment. And I saw you and I was like, you know what, I actually really want to talk to this guy. Like you say, you want to speak to me, but I also really want to talk to you too. So when you messaged me and said, yeah, do you want to come on and have a discussion? I was like, absolutely, let's do it.
Fantastic. I will say though, Jay, before we go into anything, you are the guest I've had so far that I've had the most pushback from as well, from people about why are you getting him coming on? And it would all be because of the used to be a police officer side of things. Okay.
I didn't know it was controversial.
For you?
I like that.
Yeah. Is it
Say that again?
Is it surprising for you that I got pushed back on it?
I mean, some of the comments I get on my videos are quite interesting because I would make much more money and I would be much more famous than I am now on my much more bigger channel if I sat there every day and basically slagged off the cops. And my ethos is the cops are an easy target. Everybody wants to hate the police. There's bloody songs dedicated about it. There's a song saying F the police, but never stop giving them an hard time. You know what I mean? So,
no, absolutely.
One is more popular than another. So I can understand why people have pushback because, of what I used to do for a living. But this is the thing what I want to bring to the forefront is that the organizations, so the constabularies and the people in the higher echelons of those, in my opinion, they are the issue because they push down derivatives, they push down directives, which mean that ordinary officers on the ground then get all the crap and the flack from the public. The people who are in the higher rungs of senior leadership are faceless to the public. Occasionally they might go on a talk show. Occasionally you might get a news interview with them. But as soon as that happens, they disappear back into their ivory tower, and it's the ordinary officers on the street that get all the crap. But no, I can completely understand people's vitriol and upset towards the police because, well, we never hear of the stories which are happening, probably now as we're talking, of a police officer supporting and saving somebody's life, pulling somebody off a bridge, supporting somebody who's a victim of a DA, officer who should have finished 6-7 hours ago, but is currently still writing up an incident or is on the phone to the courts trying to get a nasty person remanded. We don't hear about that. We never hear about that. All we hear is in the media, copper does this cop does this. BBC released a panorama documentary about a few isolated incidents of officers saying nasty things. Okay, and obviously when those things happen, I'm not dismissing that, they're terrible, they really are, but these things over here massively overshadow the fantastic work which happens every single day by police officers. In my next book, which I'm releasing soon, the opening chapter starts with a real officer who told me that they were single crewed. They went to an incident where a male had cut his own throat and was bleeding to death in the street. She was single crewed. She was on her own, and it took 7 to 8 minutes before backup arrived. And during that time, they had to basically save this person's life. Thankfully, the person survived. They went to hospital. They had surgery. Thankfully, they survived. And they were off 5 or 6 hours late, and they were back in again to do it the next day. You don't hear about that. You don't hear about other people that ex-colleagues of mine have pulled off bridges. There was a story the other day of somebody who went to jump in front of a train and an officer leapt out and grabbed all of them, pulled them away, a nanosecond before they got hit by a train. You don't hear about that because the media one thing what people have to remember about the media is that They are a business, and their business is telling the news and making money. They tell the news and they make money, so they want to create the most incendiary, aggressive, outrage, clickbait things as possible, because that sells the news. And what sells the news better than anyone else? Cops being bastards, MPs doing this, and people in public positions and authority misbehaving. So that sells. So people naturally have this Overton window and this impression that all cops are bad people, when in reality, the vast majority of officers, not all, absolutely not all, but the vast majority of officers do fantastic work every single day, which you will never hear about. So my entire position is, Chris, hold the system to account when it needs to be held to account, but let's not shit on the ordinary officers who people would ring in a heartbeat if their loved one went missing with a bottle of vodka and a length of rope, or someone was trying to break into their house, or they needed urgent support from somebody. And also, not only that, when there is a serious medical emergency which happens, chances are it's the police that get there first. The example used before, the person that cut their own throat, that is an ambulance job. That is a medical emergency. But a police car is faster and it's cheaper to get there. So the amount of instances what police officers go to, which they shouldn't be going to anyway, medical emergencies, mental health calls, traffic collisions, stuff like that. Things which aren't specifically crime, but the police have to go there. We don't hear about any of that. We never hear about that.
Well, so, the media runs off of, like you said, runs off of clicks. It runs off of a system that allows it to gain money for itself. And we've known that for a long time. And we're going to go into some of the things that officers might have to deal with and what you've had to deal with in terms of your time within the police service. But there is an element in the country of, is there trust for the police in the UK? Okay. And it's not for me to say, it's not for you to say, it's for you all to say, which is why we've got a little poll running on here. Do you trust the police in the UK? Yes, no, sometimes. Now, I put sometimes in there because it depends, but that's going to be running in the background. Get your say in on it as well, because we will have a look at that at the end. And I mean, what do you think, Jade? What do you think a police officer should be? What should they represent? Because to different people, they mean different things. Because I've had a guest on before, Lee Mead. He grew up in the 80s in London. The police were very different to what they were when I was growing up in a sleepy town in East Anglia, where you saw one Bobby walking the beat and that was it. They meant different things to different people. What does a police officer represent to you?
Well, you don't even see Bobbies walking the beat anymore, do you? No. Because there's not enough of them. So that, you know what, Chris, that's an interesting question. I don't think I've really been asked that before. What does a police officer mean to me? A police officer, when they turn around to kids and they say, oh, there's a police officer over there, if you're naughty, he'll arrest you. That's the wrong thing to say. It should be, there's a police officer over there. If you need help, they will help you. A police officer is somebody who is a complete stranger who will put their life on the line to protect someone they've never met, because it's a vocation. People join the job to help people. And unfortunately, the way the system is set up, that gets harder and harder, which is, like I said, we can talk about later. But in a nutshell, a police officer is somebody who is there when you need their support, and they will support you even at the risk to their own safety, because that's what they signed up to do. They're absolute everyday heroes. It's the same as a paramedic. A paramedic will drive to your house and help your loved one who's, potentially bleeding out on the, or has had the stroke or something like that. They've never met you before. And it's more than just a paycheck to them. It's more than just a job. Because if it was just a paycheck and a job, they wouldn't put themselves in so much harm's way in order to do it. Take some of the atrocities which we've seen happening so far. The Westminster bridge attack, the Manchester bombings, these awful incidents which occur. In Golders Green, there was a man running around stabbing people. Police officers turned up. To them, if it was just a job, you don't get paid very well as a bobby anyway. I mean, you're lucky after your pension and everything else, you come out with a bit more than minimum wage, and you after your contributions and stuff. So, and all the grief and everything else you get, but these people, even though they get paid like shit, they get treated like shit by both the organization and the media, they will still turn up, put their lives at risk to help people. It's more than just a job. There's something else in there, and it's this drive to want to help people and to keep people safe. And that's what it takes to be a police officer. It isn't a degree. It isn't being able to do really well on an exam. It's, do you have what it takes to, when the shit hits the fan, you are capable and somebody can call you in an emergency and you can do what is needed to do in order to stop that person coming to harm.
Well, I want to get your opinion on something because you brought it up there. So for those who are watching and aren't aware, so if we bring up the Golders Green incident, so this was I believe a gentleman walking around with a knife. I think he attacked several people, then he stabbed several people, and the police attended. And if anything, the police got lambasted for it because they were trying to remove the knife from him, but it was the fact that they were, in their words, kicking him in the head and so on. You must have reviewed that. You must have seen it. What was, as a former police officer, what did you think from that incident, and what did you think about the backlash from it?
Violence is ugly. It isn't nice to look at. And sometimes the police have to be violent to stop violence. The only reason why we have law in this country is because the state's violence can overcome the people who wish to harm the state's violence. It's literally how laws are enforced. It's enforced through the application of violence. Cops kicking somebody in the head is never going to look good. What you have to understand is that from the ordinary member of the public looking at that, people are even sympathizing with the person who just gone around stabbing people, saying, "Oh, why did he have to kick?" Mate, I've seen things online where people are saying, "Why did the police have to taser him? They could have just asked him to put the knife down." Oh, I'm sure they didn't think of that. You know, so kicking somebody in the head is obviously not a approved technique. You know, that you're not trained to kick somebody in the head, but what you are trained in is reasonable force and anything what you can do which is reasonable, proportion, justified to subdue that threat. Now, what's very important is that they kicked him in the head while he still had a knife in his hand. It would be very different is if when he'd released that knife, they continued kicking him in the head. So the strikes to the head were in order to subdue the threat, to get him to release the knife. They were distraction techniques. It was to induce pain in order to get him to stop trying to hurt them, because they didn't know whether he had another knife on him. They didn't know whether he had an explosive on him or some other kind of weapon. And what I find as well, Chris, is that a lot of people who want to sit there and criticize the actions of police officers in such a volatile, awful situation like that will never, ever, ever be anywhere near in that sort of situation in their entire lives. And if they ever found themselves in that kind of situation, they would likely ring the police for help and support. So I think it's really interesting how people do have an opinion. This is the internet. Everybody has an opinion. And it's crazy how people have such a strong opinion about a situation they'll never be in, saying they could do better, saying they could have done better if that was them in that situation. So I think the cops did a great job. I think it was completely justified. It doesn't look nice. It's pretty ugly to watch, but yeah, I think fair play to them officers for putting themselves in harm's way, and also the civilian that was involved as well, who also who was assisting the police. Ultimately, yeah, we have somebody who is a suspected terrorist who's suspected of causing serious harm to multiple people with a knife, and people feel more sorry for him rather than the officers who were charged with stopping him from hurting anyone else.
Well, I think it was Zach Galansky, wasn't it, who came out, leader of the Green Party, who gave his sympathies to the knife-wielding stabber of within Golders Green. And it just seems to me that it's almost like it's becoming more dangerous in the role. I mean, would you agree that that's the case, or is it just
100%.
muchness?
100%. So we have a few different things here. Okay, so the reason why policing is getting more dangerous, it's there are less police officers than there should be. So there's more chance officers are going to be single crewed, which means police officers are less effective in their role and they are more at risk of harm. It means training, because not as many people want to be police officers now. Training is relaxed. So people who may not have been suited to the role previously are now getting in because they need the numbers, because they have to fulfill demand. There is public scrutiny is never been higher because everyone now has a phone. We have body cameras. We have a lot of the time as well, even if nobody makes a complaint, I've spoken to loads of officers where an officer may do their job and may use force. It doesn't even have to be the victim has made a complaint, or the suspect, or remember the public has made a complaint. It could be somebody else who wasn't in the incident, who's reviewed that footage internally, has gone, I think that was out of order. And then those officers can be on a long, protracted investigation where they're potentially looking at a criminal charge, or at the very least, they lose the pension, they get sacked. The last 20, 25 years of their service has been for nothing. So then we also have a culture of fear inside the police, in which people are less likely and more reluctant to use force in order to prevent and stop a threat, which puts more people at risk. And like I said before, the laws are enforced through violence. If the violence of the state is unwilling to use violence, then the people who want to use violence to harm other people are more likely to do it, and more likely to do it and get away with it. So it's a multitude of issues, mate. There's less staff, there's more single crewing, and the police officers are more scared than ever of actually doing their job and being robust and using force for fear of reprisal internally, never mind by the social media or the public opinion. So yeah, I think it's it's an absolute shit show what's happening.
Yeah,
right
absolutely. And there seems to be certainly more protests that they have to cover now than there ever used to be. I mean, we've just literally had the Unite the Kingdom protest, which also in London, there was also the pro-Palestine one. What is it like potentially for a police officer in that case? Because, how can you police something like that?
Send police a protest.
Yeah, so I mean, like I said, we just had the Unite the Kingdom one. How can you even police something like that?
So I never did protest. So I was never PSU. Well, I was PSU trained, but there's two levels. There's PSU level 3, in which you see, the unarmed officer. The officers that are there where they don't have the right shields on. Then there's level 2 PSU where they have the right officers. I never did level 2 because you would get your rest days, your days off cancelled in the drop of a hat, and then you'd be in fucking Newcastle or something like that, police and football match. So I never did that. But I never did any main big protests. I've dealt with public order cases before. One of them was where, do you remember a few years ago where England got through to the European final and I think we lost in penalties? That night, somebody walked past me. I was on duty, I was in the town centre, and someone walked past me and went, I'd hate to be you lads tonight. I was like, oh no. Anyway, the world just erupted and it was pub fight after pub fight, and you just have to work as a team. So it's a bit different. A public order situation, I'm probably going off a tangent here, but the public order situation is very different from, can be different from a protest. Generally, protest is about keeping the peace, making sure that if you have opposing protests, so for example, the classic one, like you've said, is the Unite the Kingdom rally on this side and the pro-Palestine march on this side. That is planned to the nth degree majority of the time by very senior officers. Talk about strategy, and they'll be in liaison with the local council, they'll be liaising with local security groups and shops and everything else. It's a very well-oiled operation, and the more they do it, the better they get at enforcing it and better at sorting it out. Another key thing with that is you will take out agitators quite quickly. So if you have a crowd of 1,000 people, you may get one person who's very intoxicated or is there for the wrong reasons and start causing problems. If one person starts causing problems, that can quickly turn to 5, 10, 50 before you know you have a riot. So officers have to be very aware of, if somebody is looking like they're causing disruption and this could escalate, the officers need to be quite robust and quick on that. But this is when you get photos and videos of, this cop arrested this guy, did nothing wrong. Well, of course, they're not going to say he's fucking done something wrong, are they? They're going to say the cops are the biggest bastards walking. But it's down to planning, it's down to organisation, and the police's main role there is to keep the peace and prevent anything bad from escalating. And it's very stressful. Just not even about policing the policing the protest, Chris. Also, just the impact that has on officers, because you get officers who They're working 10, 11, 12 days in a row without a break, doing 12 to 14-hour shifts. They're not eating, they're not drinking, they're barely sitting down. They don't really get a rest breaks. I know Nottingham Carnival, is it? When that's on, the officers absolutely dread those 2 days because they're working 17, 18 hours a day. They can't have a rest, they can't have a break, and they're constantly getting spat at, they're getting assaulted. And also, as well as that, they have to be very hyper alert for, are they selling drugs? Have they got a weapon on them? Is this person going to start causing issues? So just the neurology, that's the word. The neurology, the nervous system, the adrenal system, the stress hormones, the cortisol buildup of officers during that time can't be understated. It's extremely stressful for cops, police, and those sorts of things. But the reason why people are allowed to protest in the first place and protest safely is because the police are there. So again, people want to. I did a video on it today. Actually, there was a few weeks ago. There was a police officer that was a Muslim officer. She was wearing a hijab, and I believe it was a pro-Palestine movements gathering protest, and this officer was being really nastily targeted by these people because she was a Muslim. So these wonderful anti-racist loving group of people who just want solidarity and happiness for all saw this person as a traitor because she was a Muslim and she was also a police officer and she was policing that march. To the point other officers had to intervene and basically tell these people to stop and to leave her alone. So it was trying to think. Yeah, but so people want to attack the police. But the very reason why they're able to do that in the first place and do that protest is because the police are there ensuring they can do it safely. So, that's a massive issue on people.
The thing is, Jay, is that there'll be an awful lot of people who will watch this and go, it seems like there is what they call your two-tier. And the question is always then going to be, is there such thing as two-tier? And if there is it coming from above? Because I think that's where a lot of people are getting confused as to whether it's coming from ground level or is it messaging coming from above?
So I'll answer this in two parts. In my experience, two-tier policing exists on the ground level, but not in the way what people think it is. And I'll get onto that in just a second. Two-tier policing, when it comes to we police this group more than this group, I believe it's a thing. I've never been told by any officer I've spoken to. I've never heard it in a briefing. I've never had it in an email. I've never been told that you have to police this person because of their skin color more than this person over here. Let's go soft on these people and softer and harder on these people over here. So in that sense, it doesn't exist on the ground level. But when we look at policies being brought in, the government, the way certain groups are treated, what we can see with our own eyes, I think we'd have to say that at some level it exists. In particular as well, when it comes to the courts as well. I don't believe that the courts are fair because the courts can be politically influenced. We just have to look at what happened when it was talking about Southport and there was Lucy Connolly got sent to jail for 3.5 years for an ex-post, an incendiary ex-post, not a nice ex-post. I'm not excusing what she said, but when you consider that I've dealt with cases where somebody's pinned their wife down and strangled them nearly to death in front of the children and they walked away from prison. That's not politically charged, whereas the Southport thing was. So there's certainly some political inference when it comes to the courts, in my opinion. So in that sense, I think two-tier policing exists on that much higher level and that more deep-rooted level. Where two-tier policing, I believe, exists on the ground level and happens every day is in relation to domestic violence, in which if a man and a woman report the same incident, it's more likely the male will be arrested. What also happens, and what I've been told quite a lot, is that a man may call for help when it comes to domestic assault. My partner's kicking off, she assaulted me, she's smashing up the house. The police will arrive, they will arrest the woman for a domestic assault, but then the woman will make a disclosure of some kind of essay, some kind of sexual assault. Then what generally happens, what I've been told, is that the woman will then be de-arrested and they will then arrest the male. And this happens for a few different reasons. One, we are told we have to stop violence against women and girls, which I agree with. But fucking hell, here we go. Is if we are, and then there's like positive action incentives brought in. So we need to stop violence against women and girls, which means basically if a man calls the police or if a woman and a man make an allegation, it's going to be the lad that gets locked up because we have this directive to prevent violence against women and girls. So that happens, but then what that does, Chris, is that the overloading in arrests, which frankly should never result in an arrest. Either there could be no evidence, there could be no allegation whatsoever. It could just be the police have been called. It could be a multitude of different reasons, which meant that that person should not have been arrested. There could have been a different outcome. Someone gets arrested, they then need dealing with. They need dealing with in custody. Someone needs to monitor their bail. Somebody then needs to submit the case to the Crown Prosecution Service because it's a domestic incident. The police can't charge on that. Only the Crown Prosecution Service can. So then what we have is we have ordinary officers who are then carrying 20, 30 different crimes, which should never have resulted in arrest in the first place, which need their attention all the time. And this is all to do with stats and figures. The issue with that then is they say it's to protect violence against women and girls and to protect women, but by the officers being too busy by dealing with this stuff that they're not really supposed to be dealing with, they can actively miss proper opportunities. Plus, police officers can be conditioned to not look at the grey area, to not look at nuance. If it's simply a case of, we've been called, if I don't arrest this person, I'm going to get in the shit. I then have to arrest this person. Their work becomes less, their statement taking becomes less because they do it so often. It's just a run of the mill. And half the time, they know they're not going to carry on the crime anyway. They're not going to see the investigation through. So it creates a worse service. It puts more victims at harm. And it also means that it allows, and nobody talks about this either, it allows abusive, vindictive female perpetrators, women, who are abusing their partners to use the police as a third-party proxy of abuse. For example, I'm going to leave you because you're abusing me. If you leave me, I'll stop you seeing your children and I'll tell the police that you've sexually assaulted me. Who are they going to believe? The woman or the man? And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, it's the man, it's the woman who is believed. And not only that, this directive of violence against women and girls, we miss out 40% of victims of domestic abuse that are male. So it's like trying to look at the entire problem and ignoring 40% by just focusing on the 60%. And they talk about homicide rates. They say, well, 104 women die every single year at the hands of a man. That is true. That shouldn't happen. And then they say, well, in comparison, it's only about 50 men a year or 30 men a year or so on. But I imagine, Chris, that because of how domestic abuse is created in a relationship, women are generally more fearful of the safety of being killed by the partner. Men are generally more worried about reputational abuse and being abused through the system. So I wonder how many men who are in a volatile relationship then manage to leave, have their children taken away from them with parental alienation, then have false allegations made against them, have restraining orders brought from nowhere because it's on the balance of probability against them. How many of those men who then later on go and take their own lives as a result of the way they've been treated and what's happened? I wonder if that was still counted as a homicide, a domestic homicide, just a lot longer of a longer tail of abuse, how that number would look when it would talk about the 30, 40 men a year versus the 100 and 104, for example. So going back to what your question was, Chris, two-tier police in the racial sense, I think it exists, but not on the ground level. Officers aren't directed what to do and what not to do in that sense. I believe it happens at an organisation level, just from the evidence, what we see online and what we see in the media. On the ground level, two-tier police, in my opinion, does exist because of how we see men and women are treated in domestic violence settings. And it's due to training, it's due to attitudes, it's due to government directives. So I hope that answers your question. I went off a bit of a tangent there.
Wow. So men are more likely to be arrested because essentially the system's been trained to really just hone in on men as the...
When I did my domestic abuse training and I was a specialist in it, I did my initial training and I did different advanced training courses in it. Never once did I get a training session where the woman was the abuser. It was always the man. Every time it was a man. I would happily put money on it. It was always a man. Every time.
I can tell that this particular subject gets to you.
Yeah, it does. It does quite a lot because I've been a victim of DA. I know people that have been victims of DA. I have friends who are victims of DA, who are male victims of DA, who've suffered parental alienation, who've been arrested, who've had false allegations made against them. I have dealt with so many men whilst I was a cop, and I'm sitting opposite them going, you shouldn't be here. You should not even be sat in front of me right now. And then I've gone to my supervisor after interview, and I've spoken to my supervisor and said, the CPS will never charge on this. This was not an arrest, what should have been made. And then the supervisor doesn't have the guts to no further action a potential domestic case. They always cite the homicide timeline. They cite all these different risk factors, when really what I think it is, Chris, is because if they want to go for promotion in the future, they don't want so many no further actions. They want as many charges as possible. And also, if anything ever goes wrong, they don't want to be the one to sign it off. It's much easier to pass it to a third party, such as a Crown Prosecution Service. I've dealt with loads of cases like that. And then when you get in front of a real victim of DA, male or female, you basically have to abandon everything else what you have on your plate, which needs your attention, because you are so fixated on dealing with a serious incident, which is essentially a homicide waiting to happen. Not only that, Chris, but when somebody does finally get charged after 18 months or a year's worth of work, really intense work, interviewing victims, interviewing the suspects, analyzing phones, analyzing data, gathering the evidence, they go to court, they say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have strangled her, I shouldn't have beat her to after death. And the court go, all right, yeah, see you later. And they get a suspended sentence. Then, of course, we see things in the news where somebody posts an X post or a tweet and they go to jail. Another thing, just going back to my earlier point, Chris, when you were talking about police officer assaults and police aren't safe, the courts don't give a shit about if a police officer is assaulted or not. They don't care. The sentence is very lacking. They maybe get some compensation, the officer, of which the person probably won't pay. They might pay £1, £2 a week for the rest of their lives. So there's actually no repercussion there if somebody does assault a cop. So there's no deterrent. There's less staff. There's, it's going to shit. But yeah, DA is certainly something very close to my heart.
Well, just touching upon that, then, Jay. I mean, as a man experiencing that, because there's always been this kind of idea of really a man getting abused by a woman. It's been for as long as time. But it's happened for as long as time. So being in that difficult position of being on the receiving end of it, what does that do to you? How does that feel?
Well, what was interesting, Chris, is that I was a serving officer and I was going to domestic abuse cases, dealing with male victims, and I didn't even realize I was in it myself. If anything, I was in my head, I was going, oh yeah, she thrown hot water on me, or she's done this. I'm thinking, yeah, I've had that. Yeah, I've done that. But we make excuses in our minds, and any victim of DA, any male or female victim of DA will know you excuse their behavior, and this is why it drives me fucking insane.
You had hot water poured on you.
Yeah. So what really, really annoys me is when people see cases of DA online, they see victims coming out and they say, it took me 12 times to leave, or after the 12th time of leaving, I finally broke away, or that's when he started stalking me, or, he would bug my house and stuff like that. People go, oh, why don't you just leave? Well, because the very fact you have to ask that means you don't know how abuse works. You don't know how it works. So yeah, I mean, male victims of DA, because women, speaking in generics here, like I mentioned before, men it's reputational fear, reputational damage. Women it's physical and sexual abuse, what they're more afraid of. Men might not necessarily understand that what's happening is abuse, because we are taught abuse is physical. And men, certainly in my case anyway, it was okay, the reason why she is screaming at me today is because She's not had her medication. The reason why this is happening today is because she is stressed from work, or her mum has fallen out with her. We constantly make excuses. Now, if you flip that round and you say, for example, I don't know if you ever tried this. If you Google, I'm a man and my girlfriend is shouting at me, you'll get relationship counseling, you'll get some things like that. And I encourage anybody who's not to do this right now. Yeah. If you're a woman and you say, my boyfriend keeps shouting at me, you get a domestic abuse hotline. It may have changed, but last time I did it, that is what happened. So if I go,
here we go.
I'm a man and my girlfriend is shouting at me.
It often indicates they feel overwhelmed or unheard.
Step back from the conflict and calmly refuse and engage with the don't engage with the shouting. Okay, that's if you're a man. I am a woman and my boyfriend is shouting at me. No one deserves to be shouted at, belittled. The most important step now, prioritize your immediate safety, seek help, separate, call for help, call 999.
That's dirty, man.
You know what I mean? The way how in society male victims of DA and female victims of DA are treated is incomprehensible. It's insane. And of course, I completely understand, because I had a chat about this with a lady called Rachel Williams. You ever heard of Rachel Williams? You ever heard of her?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's really, absolutely love her. I've done 2 interviews with her. I've got a book. I've watched loads of her interviews and stuff. And we had this conversation and I said, why is that the case? And she said, well, it's because a male can, you know, he can escalate much more physically with a male than it is a female. But my rebuttal to that was, well, a knife doesn't discriminate. A knife or some kind of weapon doesn't discriminate whether you're male or female. So that's obviously a serious point. But yeah, I can't remember how we got on to the But DA is a serious problem.
If you don't mind me asking, what were you on the receiving end of?
Oh, I was on the receiving end of a few things. So I've spoken about this in quite a lot of detail and other things I've thinking about. I was with someone for 7 months. Doesn't sound like a lot, but fucking hell, trust me, it was. I was with someone for 7 months. I idolized this person, thought they were the most beautiful, most wonderful person in the world. Then I realized over time, this was all part of the manipulation, all part of the game. It was the person you first met would show up every now and then in between the volatile nature of everything else. During those volatile times, you are called every name under the sun, and it can literally erupt over nothing. One was a face, I don't even know. Honestly, I can't tell you, but the most vitriolic, nasty things a person can say, because what naturally in relationships, you'll confide things to each other. You say, oh, my ex-partner did this, or I've always been a bit insecure about this. And the abuser's sitting there making notes of this in their head. They'll talk to you and they'll say, you know, it's really, really sad that that's happening. But the next time you have an argument, that's the first thing that comes out of their mouth. And essentially, I had hot water thrown on me. I was pushed a few times. I was told that my son would be better off without me, that sort of thing. Then what happened was the end. It all came to a head at the end of, it was New Year's Eve 2020, just going into 2021. Well, basically, we had an argument out of nowhere, absolutely out of nowhere. She'd had too much to drink. We had an argument. Next thing you know, I'm being punched, kicked, slapped, you know, all over the place. I tried to restrain this girl, it didn't work. The only way I could get her to stop was to hit her back. It's the only way I could get her to stop. I tried restraining her. I tried telling her to stop. She was going to hurt me, and she threatened to stab me before. So I had to do what I had to do. I'm not proud of it, but I had to do it. I then called the police. I had blood pouring down my face. I called the police and said, my partner's here. She just assaulted me. I've had to defend myself. I need help. They then turned around and said, well, has she calmed down? I said, yeah, she calmed down a little bit. I said, they said, well, we're not coming then. I was like, right, okay. So then I had to get this person out of my house myself. This woman who's just assaulted me, she just attacked me, I'm bleeding. And yeah, so then I had to kick her out of my house. I then called the police 5 times over the next few days, asking for help, asking for support. She made 1 phone call and I was arrested. nearly 36 hours after the event happened. They hadn't even been to see her. It was purely off the base of one phone call. They went to see her. I was in the cells for about 12 hours before I got released. And I was in the cells for about 6 hours before they'd even gone to speak to her. So again, that disparity. I rang up at the time of the incident. I walked into work, I cuts all over my face. People going, "What's happened?" I was like, "I don't want to talk about it." Anyway, long story short, I was no further actioned for her allegation against me. I sued the police force for quite a decent chunk of cash for an unlawful arrest, and that even the CPS in their write-up of the situation said, based on all available evidence, what he did was completely justified under law. Why did you arrest him over her when we have all of this? So, and then of course the case was no further action, and I went
What
back
was
to
their
work and everything was fine.
justification for it anyway?
No. So all that happened, and then, but the worst part is as well is that because I was treated as the perpetrator, she was never investigated, so she got away with everything. All the months of everything else put me through. So she was never investigated for that. But this was a real eye-opening moment for me, because I was like, I knew there were bad things happening anyway, and there were some decisions what were happening in the service which I wasn't too happy with, because people getting arrested for very little. But then being on the receiving end of it, knowing you've done nothing wrong, knowing you're completely justified in everything what you did, knowing that the perpetrator is currently sat at home telling lies about you, I then started to see very differently what I was a part of. And then the more I saw it, the more upset I got with it. And eventually I got to the point where I actually can't help people. All I'm doing is helping the organization tick boxes, and people are actively being hurt and being made to suffer as a result of it.
Because a lot of people are saying that because anything that's happening now, it's they're locking up in the cells for 12 hours, 18 hours, 24 hours, even whatnot. And they're saying that the locking up, waiting to be processed, is almost the punishment itself, waiting to be seen. So, sat in that cell, what was going through your head? How was you feeling? Because you've just gone through this. You've just had this, what you would deem in your own head as an injustice. That's 12 hours is a long time to be sat in a cell. So what was going through your head?
Everything, because you're thinking, one, how did they get here? You're thinking, how did he get to this point? You are sitting there thinking, what if this goes wrong? What if I lose my job? What if I get labeled as something what I'm not? What if? And yeah, it was the worst experience of my life. And this was another reason why I used to get so upset when people would be arrested. Oh, it's just an allegation, or yeah, I've got so many targets to hit this month, so this person needs to come in, otherwise I'm not gonna hit my targets for arrest, which the boss has set for me. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, you have no idea what it is like to sit on the opposite end of that cell door. It is awful. And anybody who's ever been in that position will say it's the worst thing in the world. It's not nice. So then to hear officers that are conditioned to, it's only an allegation just to arrest, and if I don't do it, then I'm going to get bollocked up a supervisor who's only doing it to appease their supervisor. People then become a statistic. We lose complete empathy for the people that we deal with when we render things down to just numbers. Like I said at the start, people join the police because they want to help people, but due to the organization, how it works, and the directives sent down from senior officers, and that everybody is a statistic and everything's a spreadsheet and everything's a new directive or a new mission or a new focus, depending on whose new ass sits on the chair,
It's
we
mad,
lose,
isn't it? Like, you know,
we lose the reason why we joined up. We lose the empathy towards people, and we start to see people as just that. It's just another incident. It's just the stat. It's just this, and that is very much the wrong way to do it. But that's not the officer on the ground's fault. That's the organisation's fault, and that is pushed down and rammed down people's throats that they have to follow it, or else, basically.
The fact that it seems like it seems mad that there's a quota almost that has to be met. Is that just so the top bod looks better on paper that they're dealing with more crimes? I mean, what is the point of a essentially a quota to hit?
Because the easiest way to get promoted is to show an improvement in the statistics in your area. So this happens in all kinds of different ways. One is arrests. We've seen an increase in 50% of arrests this way, which naturally, the more people you arrest, the more cases you put forward to the CPS, the more charges you're going to get. So by throwing more shit at the wall, more shit will stick. And my old force actually celebrated this, and they said we've had an increase in 80% in DA arrests, for example, and we can report an extra 15% in charges. This is a success. And it's like, okay, well, what about all the cases that were arrested, which were NFA'd, and you've likely been sued for an unlawful arrest? We don't publish that data because that doesn't make it look good. What about all the officers that are now overstressed and being burnt out? What about the officers who were thinking about work and doing work on the way when they're at home? What about officers' suicides when people are under investigation and our officers are too stressed to continue? What about officer mental health? What about service to the public? What about faith in the public? You said to me at the very start of this conversation, Chris, that people have little faith in the police anymore. And if anything, you got a bit of back flag for even having me on because I used to be a bobby. Not been a bobby for nearly 2 years. But yeah, because I had that old profession, people still have this opinion about the police. But the reason why people have this opinion of the police is not the officer on the ground who will turn up and support you in your darkest day. It's the directives they're getting and the people making those decisions in the higher echelons of the service to boost their own careers, and everyone below them suffers. The public, the police, everybody. And just another example on like statistics, officers are getting told, so an officer told me that they grade them in their force, whether you are green, amber, or red, on how many arrests you've got, how many stop searches you've got, how many traffic tickets you've put out, how many intelligence reports you've put out. So officers are now being graded. And if you dare fall on red, you then put on an action plan. And on an action plan, you can lose your job. If you've been in the career for 10 to 15 years, you have paid thousands into your pension. You're probably your partner's in the job. You built your entire career and your social circle around the job, and you're potentially going to get sacked because you've not lots of enough people. You damn well them handcuffs are going to go on easier because it's a simple case of self-preservation. So yeah, it's absolute bullshit. We shouldn't treat people as statistics. I believe that if the police force was measured on different metrics such as public satisfaction, officer retention, and officer mental health, then we would see a massive different police force overnight. But quotas and statistics benefit the senior officers making those decisions, and not the public who are there to serve, and not the officers that they are put in charge with in serving the public.
Well, I think the thing is that people have an issue with the police because the police officers on the ground are the only ones they get to see. They don't get to see the higher ups. They don't get to see the decision makers. And all you end up seeing are these incentives that come in. And thankfully, it seems to be on the wayside now, which was the, dare I say it, non-crime hate incident flurry of a few years ago. So yeah. I'm not actually committed a crime, but it kind of is, but it isn't, but it is, but it isn't. Okay. So for those who wouldn't be aware, maybe because they're watching abroad and wondering what the bloody hell was this all about, what was that? And why do you think it was brought in, and why do you think it's now sort of dying a death?
So I'm not an expert on it. So this is just what, please, people, if I say something, please fact check it. Okay, I'm not an expert on it. Non-crime hate incidents, I believe, I understand, were brought in following the Stephen Lawrence murder, in which Stephen Lawrence for quite a while was subject to racial abuse until the people eventually killed him. As a result of that, there were many incidents which happened which weren't technically a crime, but that would then indicate these people have certain prejudices, which then can result in a more severe crime later. That's why I think they were brought in. So the reason why they were brought in was actually a good thing, I think. We are identifying potential serious crime later on based off a protective characteristic.
Well, you didn't really hear about them, Jay. You didn't hear about them for however long. It was only really in the last 3-4 years that it suddenly seemed to be a huge thing.
Yeah. So I think the reason why they've been called out and they've died a death a little bit is because of Harry Miller. If you don't know Harry Miller, he was subjected to non-crime hate incidents are being investigated for something over something he posted online. I think he reshared something. Anyway, he naturally didn't want to lie down and take this, because what people also don't understand is that the police will say, okay, it's a non-crime hate incident. Firstly, why are you getting involved? Because it's not a crime. There is enough crime going on. You're stretched enough. Why are you dealing with non-crime hate incidents? Excuse me. So we have that. And then the College of Policing, the governing body of the police who puts forward legislation, etc., they've actually, as a result of the Harry Miller case, they changed their directive. They changed the way that we're supposed to deal with it. They said the police now have to use a common sense approach. Does this really need a police investigation? Does the police really need to go and speak to this person because they've shared a view online, or they've said something in passing in a dwelling or somewhere like that, and somebody may have found it offensive? Do the police really need to be involved in that? But all a boss will have heard, all the senior officer will have heard is, we can get more stats here, we can get more ticks in the box, and guess what? We don't have to do any more work because it doesn't need an investigation. But that's what I think anyway. But the problem is that if you're investigating for a non-crime hate incident, that still goes on your PNC, it still goes on your DBS.
That's what people were saying, you know, because like, I haven't actually committed a crime yet, I've still got something on my record.
Exactly. So if someone does like an advanced DBS check on you, might come back and say, "Oh, Chris, he's been investigated for a racism or transphobia or something like that." They don't look at the part where it says non-crime. But if you have two applicants, you say, right, Joe Blogg's here, clean as a whistle, Chris here, clean as a whistle, but he might be a bit racist according to this report, what we've got. Well, who are they going to go for? They're going to pick the other person, aren't they? They're going to pick the other person. So there's a multitude of different reasons why it's a problem. I don't believe the police should be investigating non-crime, but the issue with hate crimes in general, nobody should be targeted and abused and threatened purely because their sexuality, their gender reassignment status, their ethnicity, race, religion, whatever. It shouldn't happen. We live in a decent society. You shouldn't target people because they look a bit different or they like different kind of people to you. It shouldn't happen. The problem with a hate crime now is that as soon as somebody says it's a hate crime, it becomes a hate crime. Doesn't matter if the victim of the hate crime believes it's a hate crime. Doesn't matter if the perpetrator of the hate crime intended it to be a hate crime. As soon as anybody says it's a hate crime, it is then classified as a hate crime, which means it then needs a higher level of clearance in order to get it closed. So it needs to go up towards it needs to go up to the rank of inspector. So you have constable, sergeant, and inspector. All hate crimes have to go to an inspector. The only other incident that I'm aware of which require an inspector's authority to close are serious sexual assaults and domestic violence cases. So by that logic, we are saying that a hate crime, which can be flagged as a hate crime by anybody at any time in that evidential chain, is of the same gravity of seriousness as a serious sexual assault or potential domestic homicide. And this is a massive issue. And I've dealt with cases before where they've gone, you know, for example, someone's had their window smashed in, a shopkeeper's had their window smashed in, and say, for example, they're of Indian descent. They ring up the police and they go, somebody smashed my window, and I'd like to report it. The call taker then might go, well, why do you think that is? And the person goes, I don't know. And he says, oh, could it be because you're of, you know, foreign heritage or something like that, for example? And as soon as that call taker says that, it becomes a hate crime. Anybody at any point can say it's a hate crime. And it's so weird that this is the kind of crime which is so subjective, because if I assault you, I've assaulted you. If I've shouted an awful name or I've smashed your window, there is a physical proof that that has happened. So, you know what I mean? It's
difficult because I tell you why, Jay, this is the thing that people, I think, get the most pissed off about, okay, is because a lot of these crimes that people are getting done for or alleged to have done and all that, it's subjective. And it's subjective to what a person feels and all that. Whereas you can understand that if somebody stabs somebody else, they've done the act. There's no two ifs or buts about it. But this offense, this oh, I think it was a hate incident, when it becomes subjective, it goes back to what you said then. A person can then be sat in the cells and their world has come completely unstuck. And and what you're basically saying or alluding to, and it might be right, it might not be right. It's all down to numbers. It's a numbers game.
A lot of it, yeah. Yeah, definitely. A lot of it. Certainly when it comes to, so people have asked me before, like, why do people get arrested for tweets? Why do people get arrested for like online speech? And the answer I tend to go to, because it's the only one I can really think of that it is because if you judge a force on detections, okay, so we've had a outcome, somebody's been charged or a case has been closed with a positive outcome. The police have arrested someone, they're taking action, and it's led to something, a community resolution, a restorative justice. They've gone on a course, or they've been charged and been sent to court or prison or whatever. That then is a tick in the box for the cops. In order for that to happen, you need to have the evidence for it. So a online crime is a very easy thing to prove. We've arrested you. We have a statement from the victim to say that this person on this profile or this person sent me this message. We have your phone and your devices, and we can see the messages there, what you've sent. And because, of course, the legislation is so subjective, me as the investigating officer believes that, well, I might find it offensive. But again, Chris, this is a problem in that, like you said, we are basing law on subjectivity. If you send a case through to the Crown Prosecution Service, you might get two different lawyers. One person might say, this is shit, this is absolutely ridiculous. Why are we even looking at this? Some person might find it incredibly offensive. So we're basing law on subjective reasoning. Whereas, like I said, if someone smashes a window or someone stabs somebody or someone assaults somebody, well, it doesn't matter what the subjectivity of it is. We can see the act has happened. So another thing, what people don't talk about is the amount of communication which is actual and non-verbal, the tone of voice and the body language. If you're just working on text alone, have you ever had an argument with someone over text? You might think you are the most reasonable person in the world, and they will read it and they are coming at you with all sorts. And you're thinking, why on earth are you having a go at me about that? It's perfectly reasonable. Because you are losing so much of the natural communication cues when it comes to communicating with somebody. So someone can read something online and believe it to be really, really offensive and upsetting. They might have meant it as a joke. But again, when it comes to hate crime legislation, the very fact that somebody says it's a hate crime, it then becomes a hate crime, irrespective of the intent of the person sending it. So yeah, and the wording in the legislation, in particular when it comes to the Malicious Communications Act, is something which is deemed to be grossly offensive. What does grossly offensive mean? Seriously offensive to who? To me, I find most things funny. When someone says something awful to me, I generally find it funny. But I also know other people who are much more sensitive. And I think another reason why we're seeing an increase in these crimes is because people are just getting, people can become too sensitive now that words are violence and feelings are so important.
Do you not think, Jay, that people have clocked on to this as a winner? If they don't like somebody, if they want to cause damage, is this not, they've clocked onto the fact this is the easiest way you can bring someone down?
I think it's certainly part of it. I think there's definitely an argument to be made that is the case, 100%. Yeah. Yeah, I think the more society becomes more mollycoddled, the more the government try to put in things to say, like, you can't look at this material, you can't listen to this, you can't say this, or this is going to be censored in order to protect you. That naturally means people aren't going to be exposed to material which they may find upsetting. So then when they do see something which they find upsetting or it causes them anxiety or distress, then they're told that that's a bad thing. They're told that you're not supposed to ever feel upset. You're not supposed to ever feel sad or angry or outraged. You're never supposed to have your poor little feelings hurt. Well, frankly, I think a lot of the people just need to fucking grow up and understand that, if you see something you don't like, you can just scroll past it. It's not a personal attack on you. Someone has an opinion. And if you have an opinion, if someone has an opinion which offends you, you have the right to be offensive back. That's what free speech is. And not only that, when people talk about free speech, and I did an interview with the Free Speech Union for my latest book I'm bringing out, and they said, because I said to him, a lot of people say free speech means, yeah, okay, it's not free from consequences. Like, yes, it is. That's exactly what it means. If if you are fearful, if you're fearful over something you're going to say for fear of repercussion, that is not free speech. That is censored speech. It's suppressed speech. It's reduced speech of what you actually want to say. Now, completely going off a tangent there. I do apologize. When it comes to free speech, I'm not one of these people where I believe that you should be able to say anything. I believe there should be certain things you can or cannot say. But I think where we are now, there is a huge amount of things which we should be able to say, which we're not allowed to, but we can't for fear of repercussion and consequence from the police. And again, like I said, when we stop measuring the police service and the police force on purely statistics and data and detections and arrests, we'll see this massively drop off the cliff if we then judged it off public satisfaction and so on.
I think when it comes to free speech, though, Jay, I think that the only thing I push back a little bit against is, if we're going to have free speech, it's got to be free speech. And I think it should be a case of, I think there's the American model that we can follow. So they have it as part of their constitution. They can say what they want. But the only thing that they have to go against is a particular test, which is, did this incite violence? Is it likely to incite violence? And if it doesn't tick any of that, carry on. Say what you want.
That's Brandenburg versus Ohio, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in my mind, you either have all free speech or you don't. And in the end of the day, I think, Christ, you only have to look back at some of the programs we used to watch as kids and things like
Little
that.
Britain. Did you watch Little Britain growing up?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh my God, that you'd be burnt alive for that now. Little Britain. Back when people could have a laugh and satire, and what's happened now, you'd get absolutely hounded for that. And I think what a lot of companies do and a lot of businesses do and a lot of organizations do is that they pander to a very small minority of people that are outraged over something and make a lot of noise. And they fold under public pressure. And I have a lot of respect for companies where they do come under flack and they don't fold under public pressure. And we need to see more of that. And I do think the cultural zeitgeist is changing, because I think we went so far this way when it comes to offending people and offense, and my feelings matter so much. And how dare you say something which is offensive? And now people are just sick of it. And the introduction of the free speech union is one thing, but also, just like I said, the cultural zeitgeist around it, people going, no, why should I lose my job because I have certain political views, or I have certain views about immigration, or I have certain views about, transgender or pride? Why should I lose my job over that? It's my opinion. And I don't believe people should, unless you're being specifically targeting towards somebody and assaulting them and being really nasty towards them because of their sexuality, because of their status. But then that's a crime. That's not an opinion. You've then entered into criminality then. So, I mean, I agree with you in the sense of there should be a test. There should be like the Brandenburg versus Ohio test. Is this likely to actually cause harm? Is this likely to actually cause violence to somebody else if somebody expresses an opinion? And unless that test is reached, then there shouldn't be any police involvement. The police have a million different things to deal with all the time, and they can just about do that. Why are we now saying that we need to police thoughts and feelings instead? Because we will never win. Because as soon as we censor so much, then the next thing will be censored, next thing will be censored, until it gets to the point where you can't think, you can't speak, you can't do anything. Because
we've already seen this, Jay, because I'll tell you for why. We're seeing this at the moment with Germany. And Germany is an interesting case, and I have mentioned this on another show as well. But Germany, obviously, for the longest time, was renowned for what happened, World War II, Nazis, and so on like that. But what they have done since then, and they continue to do, is self-flagellate themselves so that they go, we're not the bad guys anymore. Honestly, see, look, we're very inclusive, but they've gone so far the other way now that they've become tyrannical in a new way. And this is what we're finding with a lot of countries where they're so adamant to prove that, we're not Nazis as well, that they then become Stalin, basically, the communist side of things. And this is where
it's a new form of oppression, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is the what was it, the famous speech? We've got a long history of free speech in our nation. Yes, thanks, Keir. I
saw a meme about that. He said, we have free speech in this country, we'll arrest anyone who says otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's fucking great.
And And it's mad because I think the Americans maybe don't know how good they've got it, because when people from outside the UK are looking at us, they're going, my God. I mean, it's just come out. We have the highest arrests for online speech, higher than China, higher than Belarus, higher than Russia. I mean, obviously, you can understand that maybe some of those figures ain't right, because are they actually declaring them? But we were at 13,000 and some odd for online, for things that, let's be honest, I doubt very many of them were inciting violence in this and the other. They were probably just hurty words that someone's gone, I don't like that. And then it's ended up in an arrest. Okay. I mean, Lucy Conley was by far the biggest high profile example of that. So for those who are listening, not aware, Southport was a horrific incident that happened a few years back. So a chap called Axel Ruda Cabana, who was the son of an immigrant who went to Southport to a Taylor Swift dance class just for little girls and whatnot. And he went there, and it was 3 beautiful little girls who he absolutely butchered to death. I mean, one of them over 100 times he stabbed this girl, pretty much decapitating her. Okay. And Lucy Conley, I mean, we have to remember there's 2 things that this country loves. It's children and animals. And if either of them are targeted anyway, we tend to erupt. Okay. There was anger in the nation. I mean, half of that was because of misinformation, shall we say, from the government about this Welsh choir boy who apparently did it.
But equally, Chris, sorry to interject on there, mate, the misinformation was because the government and the authorities didn't want to explicitly say what it was. So then people then filled the void. And I know that there's been recent legislation brought in that in a high-profile case, they will announce the ethnicity of a person and so on. But sorry, mate, I interjected.
No, absolutely. And this anger was palpable. I mean, you only had to be here to really sense that there was a communal anger towards what was going on, because there was always rumblings already about the migrant hotels that was already causing issues. So people were putting 2 and 2 together, coming up to sometimes 4, sometimes 5. But Lucy Conley, I believe the tweet that she made was burn down the hotels for all I care, I think was the tweet she made. She then did realize what she'd done. She took it down, but it was by that point too late. There were a number of people who were brought in. And what we were also seeing was these were kind of like speedy courts that don't usually happen. So therefore, that says to me, making an example of. But our prisons are full. And so people were being let out for what you would deem, and then I would deem, actual crimes to allow people like Lucy Conley to go in prison for what I refer to as hurty words online. And that is where unfortunately, and it does go back to the police as well, is that people will go, well, this is what I've seen. Here's the police. I'll mix these 2 together. This is why we don't like them.
But in that, they're also missing out that the police are the ones who went to the incident when the kids got stabbed as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the things what those officers will have seen, I still know of officers that are still off with PTSD following the Manchester bombings. So these officers go to incidents and they may never recover from it, and you don't get any warning. I went to the murder of Brianna Jai, that trans girl that got stabbed to death in the woods. I went to that, and I was one of the first ones there. And you don't get any warning. I was literally sat at my desk, and the call came in, and my sergeant went, "Get the fuck out to that now." Jumped in, grabbed my taser, drove like an absolute madman to get to that scene, and it was horrific. And I still think about it. I watched the documentary, cried my eyes out watching the documentary. I've since been back to the area where it happened years later, still got upset. We forget the impact what these incidents have on the people who we love to criticize. So in one breath, we're saying that the police shouldn't have arrested these people, which there is an argument for that. I completely understand. Somebody posting something online, we can argue that that is disproportionate, certainly to send someone to prison for it, who then pled guilty. This is what I was talking before about political influence when it comes to the courts and 2-tier systems that way. So with that, but we're also then forget that, well, who turned up and dealt with the incident and the reason why that person's now in prison because of the police. So we'd love to hate the police. We love to hate them, but we'd be very upset if there was no police around. People say, fuck the police or this or that and the rest of it. They're an easy target to hit back at. because the bosses don't stick up for the staff very rarely. The media love to hate them. And then you get mouthpieces like me who try and stand up for people. I get loads of shit. They should see my inboxes half the time. Oh my God. It's a tough wank, but I'll get there in the end.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I don't know if you knew this or not, but majority of my career has been in the funeral industry. So
I heard you mention that on one of your things.
We have a link between the police as well, because obviously we will turn up to deceased. And if it's coroners,
I bet you've got a very dark sense of humor, haven't you? There we go. There we go. I was speaking to an undertaker once, right? Oh, fucking hell, this will get your channel cancelled. I was speaking to an undertaker once, right? And you know how you have the death cards where they have the body on it and you basically mark where they're wounded? The person had unfortunately passed away, and they passed away like that with the hands like that. And what the puppy had done was he'd put the card in the fucking hand. Oh, God, it's horrendous. But what people hear things like that and they think, oh, it's really insensitive.
What it goes back to, though, is that people have to turn up to these things and they have to deal with that, because I as much as obviously you've known people who had to deal with the Manchester bombings, I know people who had to deal with the Southport girls in terms of the funeral side of things. So I can only imagine what they would have seen, what the police would have seen, I'm assuming the ambulance crew would obviously have to have turned up as well. It's the ripple effect of all the different, but it's not just these people, it's everybody else who has to deal with it. Would you say then that particular incident you was talking about, where you watched the documentary, was that the one incident that got to you the most, do you think?
A couple have got to me. That was really, really bad one. The incident I think got to me the most, though, was I was something called kiosk trained. And there was not a lot of people that could do it. Basically, interrogate mobile phones. So someone's been arrested for an offence. We've got the PIN code, or the phone's not locked, so they give us a PIN code or whatever. I would then go through the device and find the information and present it in such a way which can then be used for court. I was one of 2 officers that were trained to do that, so I was very busy, as you can imagine. One of the incidents that still gets to me, though, is I had to deal with a suicide. And it was for coroner, it was for the coroner's court. So they needed to know if this person had left anything on their device, which would indicate the reason why they went off and hurt themselves fatally. So I had to go through the phone, and he was a male, he was probably my age, probably mid-30s, 2 young kids at home. So I went through his notes, and I found basically like a big, I'm really sorry for doing this, and so on. So he's really, really, really dark. He'd struggled with his job and a multitude of different reasons as to what was written down in that. So that was interesting in a way, because you're seeing actually into somebody's thoughts, as dark as they were, you were seeing into that. But the thing that really got to me, though, Chris, was when I then had to go through his WhatsApp messages. I went through his WhatsApp messages, and there were voice recordings, and there was a few from his family, a few from his friends, but the ones that really still stick with me are the 2 that were from his kids. And we had kids that were, I think, about 5 and 7, basically pleading for the dad to come home. So yeah, that was a rough day. That was a rough day. So yeah, there was that one which was a really bad one. Got to me. There was obviously the Brianna Dye murder. There's a few. Generally, things never really stuck with me, though. I was generally quite good and robust at dealing with things. So, but for a couple of reasons. One, I'm generally quite resilient anyway, and then the way I deal with nasty things is I laugh at it. If something's awful, the best way to deal with it is to make a joke and to laugh at it. People listening to it might think it's incredibly insensitive, but if you live in that world where you're dealing with awful things all the time, you either vent it out in that way, or you will have a really serious bad time. So, so laughing at things in really dark humor was always my way of kind of coping. My girlfriend used to say to me, actually, she knew how bad a day I'd had by how dark my jokes were when I walked through the door. So if I walked in and said, oh, I've had an all right day, she'd be like, okay, I know you've had an all right day. If I walked in and I made some really dark comment or some really dark joke about something I dealt with, she'd be like, do you need to talk? Because I know how you work.
That's atrocious even for you.
Sorry, say that again.
That's atrocious even for you.
I know, right? I know. She's been with me now nearly 5 years, so she's used to me by now. But yeah, there's plenty of things which stick with you over time, like odd incidents you deal with, a hanging, a death, a call you went to. Even sometimes as victims, you're sitting talking to a victim, and they're recounting the worst things in their life that have ever happened to them. And you have to get the detail as well, so you have to get them to go deeper and deeper into what happened and really, really convey it. And I was something called Achieve Best Evidence trained, so I was ABE trained. In TV shows where you see them sat on a couch and there's an officer speaking to them in like it's all being recorded and they're sat there with a notepad and asking questions to recount it. I was trained to do that. I was trained in quite a lot of things actually. So I was trained to do that. And obviously I used to deal with really serious domestic violence cases a lot of the time because I used to get past them because I was good at them. So I would listen to somebody who would then detail in explicit detail fucking awful things what have ever happened to somebody. And you're hearing that every day. You're hearing that repeatedly. So the vicarious trauma is it really builds up. And I ended up going off ill. I ended up having a panic attack in work one day, and it was I walked into work and I was always I'm fine. Do you need any help? No, I'm good. And I sat down at my desk, opened up my work, and my sergeant said 2 words to me. Next thing I know, I'm shaking, verge of tears, and I went off for about 2 weeks after that. And that's the only time I've ever been off sick with stress in that job. But that was a long accumulation of very different things, which I just wasn't acknowledging. But also the welfare support is not there either. There's tons of officers, and I coach a lot of officers now. And the one thing they repeatedly say to me is there's no support in the job. Yes, they might put on a welfare day. Yes, you might get an email. You might get a half an hour session with somebody. But as for real proper support, it's very, very lacking, and it's just not there. So there's a lot of officers. I think the Police Federation reported that up to 35% of frontline police officers now would qualify for complex PTSD.
Wow.
And yet people say the cops do nothing and they're a lot of bastards and everyone hates them. And it's like, well, no, they get in that PTSD from somewhere and you never hear about it. So.
Well, the thing is, Jay, do you think your time in the police maybe skewed your opinion on society and how things are? Did it open your eyes maybe to society?
It's an interesting question, actually. To an extent, I'm a lot more hyper-vigilant than I was in the past. You drive around and you look at a car and you think, I'd have pulled you over. Or you walk past someone and you go, you probably got a PNC as long as your arm. Yeah, but I mean, day to day, not really. It's not, I mean, I've certainly suffered with bouts of what I would say like PTSD and a lot of mental health issues in the past, but dealing with that day by day and having a good supportive network, good partner, good family, good healthy outlets help as well. I go to the gym most days. I do long distance running, walk the dog for a couple of hours a day. And of course, getting to speak to yourself, getting to talk about my own experiences, getting to help people, but in a different way. The people that go out and help people who has no one to help them, I now help them and I advocate for them. And I get a lot of shit for it, but I also get a lot of good for it. So it depends where your focus is too. If you just listen to the people who tell you that you're a piece of, a waste of space and all the rest of it, then you're never going to do anything because there'll always be criticisms of something you do if what you're doing actually matters. But yeah, I mean, it's taught me to, when I'm speaking in conflict situations, whether that's dealing with somebody in whatever capacity or even just like communicating with my partner or communicating with my son, it's allowed me to be a lot more just explorative. Let's find out the reasons why you feel this way. Let's talk about, the issues, what are going on deeper with that. And you get to conflict resolution much quicker because you've had so much experience in doing it. It also means my son struggles to lie to me when he's telling fibs as well. So because I sit there and I'm like, you know what I used to do for a job, don't you? And you think you can pull them all over my eyes. I'll tell you what, mate, though, you might think I'm good at it. My missus is next level. She's Yeah, nothing gets past her. She's great.
The thing I think people would struggle with being a police officer is you would have had to have spoken to absolute pieces of shit during your time, and maybe in situations where you'd think, if it wasn't for my job and all that, I would jump across here and I would cave your fucking head in, mate, to be honest. How does a person get restraint in that kind of, how can you deal with someone when you know full well what they've done?
You just have to remain professional. You just have to be able to control your emotions, because if you want somebody who's committed a really nasty offense, if you want them to open up and to talk to you, if you're being aggressive and combative with them, they're not going to open up. So if you don't have to be the friend, but if you can be professional and objective, then there's more of a chance that they will open up and give you the information that they need. Equally with a victim of crime, this could be someone who you've dealt with 50 times for various different offenses, someone who's had quite a chaotic life, but now they're a victim of crime. And in order to break the cycle of their offending and then being a victim of crime, you still have to give them that compassion and that professionalism. If I want to, like, I dealt with a case where there was a prolific domestic abuser. His partner was a walking homicide waiting to happen. She never gave a statement, no matter how many times he assaulted her. He'd stabbed her, he'd done bloody all sorts to her. And we couldn't keep this guy in jail because she would never make a complaint. So the CPS don't like sending people to prison anyway, and they certainly don't like sending people to prison if there isn't a victim statement. So the fact that in order to save this woman's life, we had to get her on side. And I was the only officer who managed to get her to put pen to paper, and he went down for 5 years. And the reason why I think I was able to do that was, one, because she was ready to do it, but also because I approached her with compassion, with understanding, and with care. This woman was also a bit of a prolific shoplifter and a prolific drug user. But the reason why her behavior was the way it was because of the trauma, the history she'd had, her upbringing, and also the situation she was in with this violent, prolific, horrible person. So, you could very easily let your emotions get the best of you, but it may satisfy you then in the moment to think, yeah, I told them that, I told them they were this, I told them they were that. But ultimately it will harm your professionalism, it will harm the case, and potentially harm any prosecution, what you may be able to garner as a result of that. Don't get me wrong, there are certain situations where I have lost my temper. There was an incident where I had someone in handcuffs at a town centre. He was off his head on cocaine and everything else. He then bit me on my arm, like right into my coat, and I pulled him around and punched him in the face and I put him on the floor. And he was then arrested. Now, of course, you can argue that I should have shown more restraint there, but he also bit me, and I needed to get him off me. So, there's situations which occur where you do need to be more forceful and robust, but you always have to be restrained. You always have to show restraint. You always have to be professional. It's only what you can do which is justified, and you always have to remain professional no matter what the situation, even if that means getting violent with somebody. Someone's trying to hurt you, or you have to strike them in order to get them under control. You always have to be in control of your own emotions. And it can be very difficult. Certainly, again, like just touching on the PTSD thing, if you've got an officer who's incredibly stressed, who's got PTSD, they get all sorts of triggers, and then just that one person who they deal with sends them over the edge, they can come into red mist, they can go too far, they can do things. But to me, that's not a failing of the officer. Let me rephrase that. It is a failing of the officer's restraint in that moment, but we are ignoring the collective build-up which has gone unrecognized, which the officer should have been supported with leading up to that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, every officer has got that one person who got under their skin the most. So obviously, without naming names, who got under your skin the most from your time in there?
The one who come to mind straight away was one of the biggest cases I dealt with, and I've referenced the case a couple of times. in that he was a seriously violent and awful domestic abuser. And during interview, he went no comment to every question, started yawning in the middle of it. I'm going through, you've done this, you've done that, you've done this. Sat there with his hands behind his head, yawning. Just didn't give a shit. Didn't care what he'd done to this person. And he walked free from jail. Like all the work, all the keeping the victim on board, all the investigations, the hours and hours, arguing with the Crown Prosecution Service why he should be remanded, why he shouldn't be free to leave, the securing of 10 charges. Most people just get 1 or 2 charges. I managed to get 10, which I was very proud of. And then he then walked free from jail. He got a restraining order and a bit of a fine. And he had to go on a better relationships course in order to teach him how to not hit women. And yeah, he walked free from jail. But I can either focus on him getting under my skin in that he effectively got away with it. Granted, now he's got a criminal record and he's got conditions and stuff. Or I can focus on the woman who put her faith in me and now I've saved her life. So, and I choose that path rather than to focus on. If you get annoyed, if you focus too much on the bad people in the job, you'll go crazy. You'll have an opinion of the world which is not a healthy one. You become very nihilistic. Everyone's out for themselves. There's no meaning to anything. Everyone's a piece of shit. You can become like that. So you have to learn how to compartmentalize the bad and focus on the good. Because good things do happen. You do have some really good jobs where you do save people and you do help people. They can be very few and far between, but you have to understand that's why you joined. And even sometimes offenders, people that are having the worst days of lives. I dealt with a guy once, and he had a pickaxe. He was having a mental health breakdown, and I turned up, and he was built like a brick shit house. He was a big lad, and none of us had a taser. There was 4 of us. None of us had a taser, and he was basically like, "Come and have a go if you think you're hard enough." And he had a fucking pickaxe in his hand. So we managed to get him on the floor, get the pickaxe off him, and obviously for him, right then, that was the worst day of his life because he's had an absolute breakdown. He's an ex-army, so he's PTSD. He's never been checked properly, so he popped, for want of a better phrase. As a result of that, though, he then got the help he needed because he then went to crisis. So he got all the support and stuff what he needed, and he never came to our attention again. So sometimes even someone in a really serious, awful moment can then get the support via the police getting involved. And again, all people would have seen if people were recording that incident is 4 coppers locking up an army veteran. You know, it doesn't sound good, does it? But what people then don't understand is that as a result of that, this man was prevented from then hurting himself further because of the involvement of the services as a result of him not getting support before. So people don't talk about that either.
Have you ever found yourself in a position, I mean, it might have been that situation where you thought to yourself, I'm in shit here. This could go very nasty.
That was quite a hairy one. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there have been. I can't think of any off the top of my head. Really, really nasty moments. I mean, there was one where I had a fight in Aldi with a guy who, you know, he was incredibly violent. Had a fight with him over prawns of all things. The reason why we got called was because he bought prawns and the Aldi wouldn't refund him the prawns, and he just booted off. So then we got called and we ended up having tussle with him. There was one lad who I'd wrestled round in his living room while he was in his boxers, because we got called to his house following a disturbance after he'd been on a night out with his partner. And he was no trace. He was never been in trouble before, and he was, I would say, the most violent human being I've ever met before. We gassed him, we put him on the floor, we handcuffed him. He was just not forgiving up whatsoever. So sometimes it can be the people you just don't suspect. You can just pop off. There's cases where I've pulled people off bridges and I thought they were going to jump, and I've thankfully managed to come over the other side. There have been an instance where I've been thinking, I don't know what to do here. but you've made your best judgment and you managed to fix it and sort it out, and nobody's died. So yeah, as well, what people don't realize is policing is not an exact science. It's not you do X and Y will happen. It's every single time you go to an incident, it's problem solving. You're dealing with people's lives. And you might try one option, that doesn't work. So then you have to try another option, that doesn't work, thinking, shit, right, okay, what other options have we got here? And then you might make a decision, then get criticized for it, or you might be commended for it. So it's not an exact science. You're dealing with people. In training, I had an old tutor who told us that policing is about people, policing brains. You're policing behavior, you're policing trauma, you're policing circumstance, policing stress, you're policing mental health, you're policing so many different things. It isn't a case of this situation calls for this, because if that doesn't work and you only rely on one way of dealing with things, you have to be so adaptable. And I mean, for the most part, I used to really, really enjoy it. I used to really enjoy it until near the end of my service, when it really started to crumble and all the issues which I talk about really came to fruition. For the most part, when I first started, it was I really enjoyed it. I never wanted to do anything else. And the team was really good. We had a lot of staff. We had great supervision. We had a lot of resources. We were able to do our jobs properly and effectively. We were able to go and problem solve, be able to spend time, deal with people properly and get the best outcome for people. And then, like I said, there's leadership changes, new things happen, people move on, funding gets cut. Eventually, the service just got stripped more and more and more, and it just became more and more harder to do your job to actually help people and support people. So, yeah.
You did mention, obviously, that incidents can happen in the police where the police do or don't do things that they should do. Okay, much like any institution, there's going to be things that happen. There's going to be three incidents I want to talk about with you, because I just want your input as to how you feel about it. Okay, and actually the first one comes through a comment that's just come in. Thoughts on 15-year-old Rocco Kirkpatrick having his head impaled on a fence spike by Suffolk frontline officers? The police concealed BWV footage his mother obtained council CCTV showing the PCs lied. Are you aware of this one? Never
heard of that incident before, unfortunately. But if that's happened the way that it is described, then obviously that's not okay. And those officers should absolutely be held to account for that. Yeah.
For that one,
but again, I don't know the incident. So
I saw the footage of it because I'm aware of this one because it's kind of near my neck of the woods as well. So I think it was one of the festivals going on. There was a 15-year-old lad. They were moving him out of the way, but what looked like a little bit heavy-handed, and they've essentially pushed his head forward, but he was near to a fence which had spikes coming, and it's gone straight into. But instead of just
did he die or
no? But if you actually saw the what actually happened,
I mean it's not going to tickle that, is it? That's pretty awful. Yeah.
But the issue is that it's not so much it is that as well. A, that it happened, but B, it has been a kind of a little bit of a shh. It hasn't.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, so I can understand that. I mean, the officers might be justified in pushing his head down for whatever reason, or at least have to account for why they did that, and then the subsequent injury what occurred. The problem is when they go, shit, let's not discuss this. Part of policing is honesty and integrity. You have to be open about your decisions. You have to be accountable for what you do and the decisions you make, even if that means you cock up. Whenever I cocked up, never tried to hide it, just said, boss, I've cocked up, and it could be sorted. Maybe get a bit of a bollocking. Maybe you'd have to go and do poo watch for a week. But you dealt with it, and thankfully nothing bad ever happened, nothing to that extent anyway. So, yeah, I mean, my opinion on that is, like I said, first time hearing it. There's one thing the incident happening, there's other thing trying to cover it up. And I think the covering it up is probably worse because it's an affront to the core tenets of what policing is.
I'm going to try and find it as well. So I'll send you an image of what happened. But in the meantime, the other incident I want you to reflect on is the Met Police who left the bag of guns on the street near Sadiq Khan's house and was found by a member of the public.
There's a great comedian called Pat Smith, I think his name is, and he did a bit on that. And he's ex-army, so he's going through it all and he's talking about it all and stuff. It's that's just Oh, people make mistakes. Like, no one got hurt. Obviously, someone's getting their ass handed to him for that. No one got hurt. It could have gone much worse, but it didn't. People cock up. That's
absolutely.
just a mistake what's been made. That
I've just sent you the photo of what happened to the 15-year-old onto your WhatsApp. I'm not going to share it on here because it will. If there's one thing to get demonetized, that will.
Oh, hello.
Yes. So Spike on top of fence straight into the. Yeah. Shh.
Okay, that's not gonna. You're gonna feel that, aren't you? Wow. Yeah, well, I hope he's all right.
Yeah. And then the one, only because it's getting an awful lot of media attention at the moment, is this 18-year-old Henry Novak, the one who was stabbed and then was arrested. Well, he was handcuffed because the chap who stabbed him said that he was racially abusing him, and he actually died because of said stab wound whilst he was handcuffed. Yeah. Now, I've obviously botched a lot of information there. You can go out and find it yourself, but thoughts and feelings from that, because at the moment it's going through the courts, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, and we don't want to say anything which might prejudice the investigation at all. From what I would like to know is, did the police know that somebody had been stabbed? And if they did, that then asks the question of, well, why wasn't he given medical attention at the time? Or if he was stabbed and the police didn't know, then they're seeing somebody has reported this person has been racially abusive to me, so in their eyes they're going, well, he's a perpetrator of a hate crime, hence why he was arrested. I mean, it's tragic either way, isn't it? Unfortunately, somebody's died that should have been given medical attention. And I've been to stabbings, and it's absolutely awful. And I went to a stabbing once where we could see the wound on the front, and we were putting pressure on that. We didn't see the wound at the back until a little bit later. So it's like, right, okay, we need to double-ended approach here. But it can be easy to miss a stab wound. Certainly if it's dark clothing, it's dark. It's not always visible. But yeah, I mean, I wish that the officers didn't handcuff him if he'd been a victim of stabbing. And yeah, those officers absolutely need to be held to account of why they did that, why they handcuffed him, what their decision making was in that point. Did they know he'd been stabbed? If they did, why wasn't first aid given? If they didn't know he was stabbed, why did he need to be handcuffed? How was he presenting? And not just that, but after the incident too, what was the aftercare like? Because when someone is arrested, you're in charge of them, you're in charge of their safety and their well-being, then they become your responsibility, your prisoner. So did they see a deterioration in him? If they did, what was the response? Yeah, it's some serious questions obviously need to be asked about that. But I mean, either way, the focus is a young man lost his life.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What didn't need to. So.
Before we hit the comments, one question to ruffle feathers, because that's what we like to do here. Capital punishment, yay or nay?
I did a video on this recently. No, I don't think so. I explored many arguments as to why people say it should happen. And with every argument, I couldn't come up with a strong enough reason to allow it. So my answer is no.
Because what you'll say is you'll get people who will say, for example, the example of Axel Ruda-Cabana and the Southport killings. And when you've had examples of, because people say, well, look, they're going to go to prison. It's whole life order. They're not coming out. So they've got to try and in some way rehabilitate inside of prison. And then you still carry on getting incidents of, I believe, where he's poured hot water at prison officers and so on. People will say, well, why am I paying for this? Especially when this is a cut and dry incident.
Absolutely. I can completely understand the reasons for and against. The issue with Axel Ruda-Cabana is that what we have to ask ourselves is, are we killing him for justice or for vengeance? Are we doing it out of anger, in which we think he should die because of what he did? And don't get me wrong, I think the guy should swing. I would not shed a tear if we brought back for him at all. But do I think it should be reinstated? And we have to ask the question of, is this justice? As in, is this a warranted punishment which staying in prison for the rest of your life, which is a life sentence, cannot solve? Or is it anger? We are angry, therefore this person should die. You have to ask yourself that question. Now, when it comes to how much money, because I used to think all of this, and it was only when I did a bit of a deep dive into it and kind of attack my own thinking, which I think a lot of people need to do with a lot of things, which you might think. I think it's important people challenge their own perspectives and own narratives around certain topics, because that way you don't just live in an echo chamber. You know that the things you think are your genuine thoughts because you've stress tested them. So when it comes to saying, well, he will have £1 million worth spent on him, for example, in that time frame, we could use that money much better. Why are we doing it? I don't like the idea of someone's life being directly linked to value, as a monetary value, because then the other argument can be, well, okay, so it costs them £1 million to keep in jail. What if they have been a net contributor to society of 50 million? All right. So then if it's purely based off numbers and how much this person is going to cost versus how much they've put in, well, then that can create a disparity then between punishment. So we have person A over here and person B. They both committed the same offense. They both killed somebody or done something really terrible. Person A has contributed a net of 50 million. Person B has taken away 10 million in the sentences by the time the sentence is done. Are we saying that for the same crime, if the same punishment was to be applied, we are going to punish the person who has not contributed as much to society purely based off cost, rather than the person who's contributed more? In that sense, it creates a system which is based on class rather than based on justice and based on what somebody's done. Under the law, you're supposed to be treated as an equal to the person next to you, aren't you? So yeah, when the justice system, I can understand the vengeance argument, eye for an eye. I don't believe that holds up to scrutiny. I don't believe that's can be stress tested to the nth degree, because I think we ultimately come back to vengeance. We feel he should die because what he did was so awful, but is that justice when we can put them in prison for the rest of their life? And when it comes to the argument in relation to cost, why are we basing somebody's worth off the cost of what they contribute or take away from society? So yeah, I've stress tested this. I don't believe we should have it.
Well, I certainly think this will be something that I would like to hear from people in the comments, even after the live stream as well, because I'd like to sort of get a take from both of this. Let's go to the comments because we have some coming in. So Journey Through Life, I'll be there. Looking forward to the discussion. Thank you ever so much, my friend. I know you've been looking forward to this. Libby says, good evening, gents. Thank you ever so much, Libby. And then we've got Safina, who has said hi. Thank you for that. Just to provide balance to this, Sebastian says, you're a joke. Okay. Probably talking to me, to be fair. No,
he's welcome. He's welcome to his opinion. That's completely fine.
Absolutely. JRP, there's definitely seemed to be an agenda from the government, Ari, the United Kingdom rally, and thankfully there was not too much trouble. I think the police did really well with both protests and the FA Cup final. I mean, whoever decided to have all three things in London at the same time? That's a
perfect storm, that, isn't it, for me?
I mean, Christ, if there was ever an opportunity for something to happen, and I'll be honest, I was expecting it. I thought there's too many things going on at once. Plus adding a bit of alcohol and so on, especially with the football side of things, and very surprised that nothing came out of that. Journey Through Life, just sub to your channel, Jay. Cannot wait to watch your vids. You seem like a great person.
That's a very nice thing of you to say and to do. Thank you very much.
No problem at all. What else have we got on here? So Andy Martin, evening, gents. Great discussion tonight. I think it's important to have these conversations, to be honest. I think it's good to have talking points. And a lot of these podcasts are going to be about looking at society, and particularly with the male side of things as well, because you've talked about, obviously, the domestic abuse side of things, and you feel that there is a sort of a bias there. This is going to be in relation to when we was talking about TV shows. What about Benny Hill? Can you imagine Benny Hill now? I wouldn't even get anywhere near.
I never really watched Benny Hill. I never really watched it. I think that was a little bit before me, a little bit before my time. But yeah, if it's anything like Little Britain or those kind of like the Catherine Tate show, anything like that, it'd be struck off in a heartbeat, wouldn't it? And it's a shame because these programs were really funny. So
yeah, absolutely. Is PCSO an acronym for the word cops? Because this is the closest they'll get to be an officer.
Stop it. I've worked with some great cops who used to be PCSOs. And PCSOs are very, very important. But yeah, Police Community Support Officer. That's what a PCSO stands for. And yes, they do get paid. A lot of people don't think they do. They think they're volunteers, but no, they get paid. They just,
It's
they
the
just
specials
don't
that
have
don't get paid.
powers.
It's the PCSO.
Specials don't get paid. I did that for a couple of years, being a special. That was fun.
The Times News yesterday reported that Kent Police recorded. Oh yeah, we got an earthquake going on.
Sorry,
mate.
me dog nearly knocked me camera over. So stand by. Give me 1 second.
It's all right. No worries. It's because this news story was so shocking that your dog decided to get involved. So, whilst you're listening there, so sorry, I can't even read now. The Times News yesterday reported that Kent Police recorded a crime against a 1-year-old child. No investigation is occurring due to the legal age starting at 10. Is this toddler tier policing?
Toddler tier policing. It was likely. It's probably not true. But if it is, it was likely a non-crime hate incidents, because I've heard of non-crime hate incidents being recorded against school kids before. Don't believe everything you read in the news. The reason why they put our headlines like that is so you click on it, and then the headline is probably nothing like the actual, the news article is probably nothing like the headline. They have to make these clickbait titles so people click on them and talk about them, because then they get revenue. So don't believe everything you hear.
Do you remember the Daily Star, or used to be Daily Sport, man burns his penis by sticking it in Greg's pasty and things like that? There was always used to be stories like that.
That's an image I didn't want in my head. That's an image I didn't want in my head tonight, but right. I saw one and it said like a man sticks 60 cream eggs up his bum or something like
there
that.
It's
like, what the fucking hell?
Absolutely.
Yeah, awful.
Yes, I am going to answer this question because it seems we've had a bit of a technical malfunction. Someone said, where's the poll? It is there, but for some reason it's not getting through to the people. So you will survive today, Jay. No, people have not had their say on whether they trust the police or not. Okay. And again, really great discussion this evening. I've been tuned in the entire time. Thank you, Jay, for sharing your experiences. Really nice to hear.
My pleasure.
And just to bring the tone of the entire chat down with the final comment. Okay. I was caught driving whilst my girlfriend gave me a blowy. I was reported by police for driving without due care and erection. My partner was done for handling swollen goods.
Stop it. I'm on that. I was told a story by a girl who used to work with before I started in the job. A girl who used to work with, that her friend, so I was a friend in it. Her friend was caught on the motorway giving oral sex to her partner, and an unmarked police car drive past and saw it, and then pulled him over and then gave her a bollocking on the road to basically tell her how dangerous it was to do that. She said that she wanted the earth to swallow her whole. Pardon the pun. But yeah, it's I mean, it's incredibly dangerous. Don't do it.
Where can people find you, mate? So if people want to get your work, and obviously you're a published author as well with books and so on, where can people find you?
Well, first I'd like to say this has been great. I've really enjoyed this. It's been dead fun. I'm sorry my voice got a bit crackly at points. I've run out of lemonade. But my main 2 policing books are there. We have the Jobs Fuck there, which is my police memoir. This next one is my new one, which is coming out on the 6th of June. You can pre-order this special edition copy right now via the link, by heading to my website, jaydarkmoreauthor.com. So there's those. I also have a lot of thrillers out, which a lot of crime thrillers too, because I wrote crime thrillers prior to releasing these. But yeah, just type in my name on Amazon or type in my name. You'll get me on. I'm on most platforms. Most prominent platforms are YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, I believe. But yeah, just type my name in somewhere. You'll find me in some capacity.
God bless you, Jay. Thank you so much for jumping on this. And thank you as well for also watching this today, the Wise Words podcast on YouTube and also now on Spotify as well. So you can find that on there. If you too want to be a guest on the show with an interesting story to tell, much like Jay, then please get in contact. The email address is available on the channel description. Jay, God bless you, mate. And you take care of yourself, buddy.
This was fantastic. Thank you very much. You have a great day. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
Take care, folks. Be good. Thank you ever so much,